Think about the black grandmothers you knew, the ones who were on their feet before sunrise, cooking full meals from scratch, working all day, praying at night, and doing it all over again the next morning. No gym membership, no wellness app, no vitamin subscription delivered to their door. And somehow, they outlived everybody around them and looked good doing it. There is something those women knew about staying healthy that we have completely lost. And today, we are going to talk about exactly what that was. Hi, my name is James, and welcome to Soulful Nostalgia, where we dig deep into the traditions, the wisdom, and the everyday genius of the generations that came before us. If this is your first time here, make yourself comfortable. And if you have been here before, you already know we do not do surface level around here. We go all the way in. Now let us get into it. They move their bodies without calling it exercise. Here is something that would genuinely confuse your grandmother if you tried to explain it to her. You would have to sit her down and say, "Grandma, people pay money every month to go to a building where they walk on a moving floor that takes them absolutely nowhere." And she would look at you with that particular expression that black grandmothers have mastered across generations. The one that says she is not angry, just deeply, profoundly disappointed in what the world has become. Black grandmothers in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s did not exercise. They lived. And living, the way they lived it, was a full-body workout from the moment their feet touched the cold floor in the morning to the moment they finally sat down at night. They scrubbed floors on their hands and knees. They wrung out heavy wet laundry and hung it on lines stretched across the yard. They stirred thick pots of greens and cornbread batter with arms that never seemed to tire. They walked to church, to the market, to the neighbor's house, and back again without thinking twice about the distance. The body was not something you worked on separately from your life. It was the instrument you used to live your life, and because they used it constantly, fully, and without reservation, it stayed strong. Muscles were maintained through necessity. Flexibility came from reaching and bending and lifting every single day. Cardiovascular health came from never truly stopping. Modern wellness culture has convinced us that health is something we schedule, something we purchase, something we achieve during a 45-minute window while a stranger yells encouragement at us over a speaker. Your grandmother never needed any of that. She was already doing the work. They never ate processed food because it didn't exist yet. Let us be completely honest about something. A significant portion of what sits on grocery store shelves today would be completely unrecognizable to a black grandmother from the 1950s. Not just unfamiliar, unrecognizable. She would pick up a bag of whatever fluorescent, artificially flavored, shelf-stable snack product you want to name, read the back of it, and not understand a single ingredient list there. Those ingredients did not come from anywhere she had ever been. Black grandmothers ate real food, not because they were following a dietary philosophy or participating in a clean eating movement, but because that was simply all there was. Dinner started with raw ingredients: a whole chicken, dried beans soaked overnight, collard greens still carrying a little dirt from the garden, cornmeal from a bag that had nothing added to it, butter that came from cream, and nothing else. The food they cooked had ingredients you could count on one hand and pronounce without a chemistry degree. And here is what nobody talks about enough. That simplicity was protective in ways that science is only now beginning to fully document. No preservatives flooding the digestive system. No artificial dyes triggering inflammatory responses. No high fructose corn syrup quietly dismantling metabolic function over decades. Just food. Honest, straightforward, recognizable food that the body knew exactly what to do with. The chronic diseases that are quietly destroying entire generations today, diabetes, hypertension, and inflammatory conditions that seem to touch every family, were not nearly as common in the world your grandmother grew up in. And the food had everything to do with that. Everything. They grew their own food and knew what was in it. Walk behind almost any black family's home in the rural South during the 1950s and the 1960s, and you would find a garden. Not a decorative garden, not a hobby garden with a cute little sign stuck in the dirt. A serious, working, feeding the family garden that produced collard greens and tomatoes, and butter beans, and okra and sweet potatoes, and whatever else the family needed to survive the summer and preserve through the winter. Black grandmothers knew that garden the way they knew their own children. They knew which plants needed more water and which ones needed more sun. They knew when the tomatoes were ready and when they had gone too long. They knew how to rotate crops before agricultural schools were teaching it. They knew how to read the soil, the sky, and the season in ways that no app will ever be able to replicate. And what grew in that garden went directly into the pot. There was no cold storage supply chain, no distribution warehouse, no truck driving produce across 3 state lines before it reached a store shelf. The food was picked in the morning and eaten by evening. The nutrients were still fully present because nothing had been lost to time or distance, or refrigeration, or artificial ripening. Your grandmother did not know the word antioxidant. She had never heard of phytonutrients, but she was consuming them in concentrations that modern people are desperately trying to replicate with expensive supplements. She just called it supper. They drank water and herbs, not sugary drinks. Somebody needs to say this plainly. The average American today is slowly drowning in sugar, and most people do not even realize it because the sugar is hiding inside drinks that do not taste particularly sweet. Sports drinks, flavored waters, coffees with 17 added ingredients, juices that have never been anywhere near an actual piece of fruit. Black grandmothers drank water. Well water, often. Water that had traveled through layers of earth and come up cold and clean, carrying minerals that the body recognized and used. When they were not drinking water, they were drinking herb tea, brewed from plants they had grown themselves or gathered from the land around them. Mint for digestion, chamomile to calm, sassafras in the spring to clean the blood, elderberry tea when cold season arrived. These were not trendy wellness beverages. They were medicine disguised as a warm cup. And the thing about drinking water and herbal tea, instead of everything else, is that your body runs cleaner, runs cooler, and runs longer when that is what you are giving it. The kidneys function better. The liver is not constantly overwhelmed. The joints stay more flexible. The skin stays clearer. The mind stays sharper. Now, I'm not saying Grandma had this all figured out scientifically. She would have laughed at you if you tried to explain electrolytes to her, but her body knew. And the fact that she was sharp and moving and present well into her 80s and 90s is the proof that her body was receiving exactly what it needed. They slept when the sun went down. This one is going to sting a little for those of us who are currently reading this at midnight on a phone screen with the brightness turned all the way up while eating cereal directly from the box. I am not judging. I am simply reporting. Black grandmothers slept, and not just slept. They slept in alignment with something ancient and biological that modern life has completely dismantled. When the sun went down and the day's work was finished, the body rested. There were no screens keeping the brain artificially stimulated at 10, 11, and 12 at night. There was no blue light telling the nervous system that it was still daytime. There was quiet. There was dark. And there was deep, restorative sleep that allowed the body to do the rebuilding and repairing work it is specifically designed to do during those nighttime hours. Grandmothers went to bed early because they rose early. and they rose early because the day demanded it. That rhythm, that alignment between light and dark, and waking and sleeping, is something that researchers in sleep science are only now recognizing as critical to long-term health outcomes. Disrupted sleep patterns have been connected to weight gain, cognitive decline, weakened immunity, cardiovascular strain, and accelerated aging. Your grandmother had none of those disruptions. She slept the way human beings were built to sleep, and her body thanked her for it every single morning when she rose without an alarm, without grogginess, and ready to do it all again. They never sat still long enough to get sick. There is a phrase that researchers use today that would have made your grandmother genuinely laugh out loud. That phrase is sedentary lifestyle. The idea of a person spending most of their waking hours sitting still would have been so foreign to her that she could not have fully imagined it. Sitting was something you did briefly between tasks, not as a way of life. From the moment she was up and moving, your grandmother was in motion. Breakfast was made from scratch, which meant standing at the stove for a significant stretch of the morning. The house was cleaned, which meant moving through every room with intention and physical effort. Laundry was handled, which meant carrying, lifting, scrubbing, and hanging. Children were managed, which in large families was practically an athletic event on its own. And none of this was considered exceptional. None of it was bragged about or tracked on a device. It was just life, just what the day required, just what you did. What we now know from decades of research is that consistent moderate movement throughout the day is one of the most powerful predictors of long-term health. More powerful in many ways than intense scheduled exercise done by people who otherwise sit completely still for 10 hours. Your grandmother was essentially practicing what modern wellness researchers call non-exercise activity thermogenesis. She simply called it not being lazy. They cooked with healing ingredients without knowing the science. Walk into any Black grandmother's kitchen in the 1960s and pay attention to what she was actually putting into her food. Not just the main ingredients, the supporting players, the things she added without measuring, the things that went into every single pot without exception. Garlic went into almost everything, pressed raw into greens, simmered into beans, rubbed onto meat before it hit the pan. Garlic, as modern research has confirmed, is one of the most powerful natural antimicrobial foods and a strong supporter of cardiovascular health. Your grandmother did not need a medical journal to tell her that. She knew it in her hands. Onions showed up in everything that garlic did not, and in plenty of things that garlic did as well. Apple cider vinegar sat on the counter doing double duty as both a cooking ingredient and a health tonic, splashed into greens and drunk diluted in water for digestion. Turmeric found its way into certain dishes in ways that families did not even think about, just as something that went in because it always had. Ginger appeared in teas and baked goods and home remedies alike. And yes, we need to talk about the pot liquor. The dark, rich, deeply concentrated liquid left behind after a pot of greens had been cooked low and slow for hours. Grandmothers saved that liquid and drank it like a tonic because they knew something was in it worth keeping. What was in it, as it turns out, was a concentrated source of vitamins and minerals that had cooked out of the greens into the water. She drank her vitamins in a cup for free from the stove. They had community, and that community kept them alive. Loneliness is now being described by health researchers as one of the most dangerous conditions affecting modern adults. Not a feeling. Not an enemy, not an inconvenience. A genuine health threat that has been linked to increased risk of heart disease, cognitive decline, weakened immunity, and shortened lifespan. People are quite literally dying from the absence of meaningful connection. Your grandmother did not have that problem, not even close. Black grandmothers existed inside webs of community that were so tightly woven they could barely take a step without encountering someone who knew them, needed them, or was checking on them. The church was the anchor, providing not just spiritual community, but practical social infrastructure that kept people visible and connected every single week. Neighbors knew each other genuinely, not just as faces attached to houses, but as people with histories and families and needs and gifts. Women gathered in each other's kitchens. They sat on porches together and watched the street and talked and laughed and argued and resolved it all before supper time. They participated in susu circles and church auxiliaries and neighborhood associations that gave every week a shape and a social purpose. There was always somewhere to be, always someone expecting you, always a role that only you could fill. What that constant connection did for the nervous system, for the immune system, for the basic human need to feel witnessed and valued is incalculable. Your grandmother was not lonely, and her body carried the evidence of that fact in every year she lived past the point where isolation would have started taking its toll. They had purpose every single day. Here is a question that nobody was asking Black grandmothers in the 1950s and the 1960s, but that an alarming number of people are asking themselves today. What is the point of getting up in the morning? Your grandmother never had to ask that question. Not because her life was easy. It was not easy. Not because she never suffered or struggled or carried weight that would have broken a lesser person. She carried all of that. But she always had a reason to get up. Children needed feeding. The garden needed tending. The church needed her on the auxiliary committee. The neighbor down the street was sick and needed a meal brought over. The grandchildren were coming on Sunday, and the house needed to be clean, and the food needed to be started. And nobody else was going to do it. Purpose was not something she searched for. It was piled on her doorstep every single morning, before she even got dressed. What researchers now understand about purpose and longevity would not have surprised your grandmother at all if you explained it to her. People who report having a strong sense of purpose live measurably longer, experience lower rates of dementia, recover from illness faster, and maintain better physical function into old age. The Japanese have a word for this: ikigai, a reason for being. Black grandmothers had been living that concept for generations without needing a word imported from anywhere. Her purpose kept her sharp. It kept her moving. It kept her here. They fasted without calling it fasting. Intermittent fasting is currently one of the most popular health trends in the world. Books are written about it. Podcasts are devoted to it. People track their eating windows on apps, and they debate the optimal number of hours, and they argue online about whether black coffee breaks the fast. And right now, somewhere, a Black grandmother who lived to 93 is looking down at all of this with the same expression from earlier, because she did it her whole life. She just did not have a name for it. Black grandmothers in the 1950s and 1960s did not snack. That culture did not exist the way it exists today. You ate your meals, and between meals you drank water, and you kept working, and that was it. Breakfast was eaten after the morning work was done. Dinner was the main meal of the day, and it was substantial. Supper in the evening was often lighter. And then the kitchen closed, and it stayed closed until morning. There was no mindless eating in front of a television. There was no refrigerator grazing at midnight. There was no gas station on every corner selling individually wrapped processed snacks in 17 flavors. The body had time, genuine of extended time between eating events, and during that time, it did the maintenance and repair work that it only gets to do when it is not constantly occupied with digestion. Your grandmother gave her body that time every single day without reading a single article about it. They managed stress through faith, not pills. Let us be real about something. Your grandmother's life was not stress-free. Do not let the nostalgia of this conversation make you romanticize what she was actually navigating. She lived through eras and circumstances that would test any person's mental and emotional endurance to its absolute limit. She raised children on wages that were never enough. She survived losses that came without warning. She endured indignities and injustices that would fill volumes. She carried weight that most modern people, with all their advantages, would struggle to hold for a single afternoon. And yet, she did not fall apart. She did not collapse into chronic anxiety. She did not spend decades medicated into a manageable numbness. She pressed on, and she did it with a particular quality of peace that people who knew her still talk about years after she is gone. Faith was not a casual part of her life. It was the structural foundation that everything else was built on. Prayer was not something she performed on Sunday mornings. It was something she did in the kitchen before breakfast, quietly, before anyone else was awake. Scripture was not verses she had memorized for show. It was language she thought in, processed grief in, found comfort in when comfort was nowhere else available. Church gave her community, as we already talked about, but it also gave her a framework for making sense of suffering that did not require her to carry it alone. She handed it over regularly and consistently, and her nervous system was calmer for it. Her cortisol levels, if anyone had been measuring them, would have told a story worth listening to. They used the land as their pharmacy. Before there was a Walgreens on every corner, before television commercials told people which pill to ask their doctor about, before managing symptoms with purchased pharmaceuticals became the default response to every physical complaint. There was a black grandmother who knew which plant in the yard handled which problem. She knew that the aloe growing on the kitchen windowsill was for burns, and she did not wait to apply it. She knew that elderberry prepared in the fall would help the family through winter illness. She knew that sassafras root boiled into tea was for spring cleaning of the blood. She knew that ginger settled the stomach, that peppermint opened the sinuses, and that chamomile brought sleep to a restless child. These remedies were passed down from her mother, who received them from her mother, carried out of circumstances where this knowledge was not optional, but essential. This is not to say that modern medicine has no value. Please hear that clearly. But there is a profound difference between a woman who understands her own body, knows the first line of defense available to her from the natural world around her, and manages minor ailments before they become major ones, and a person who has outsourced every question about their own health to someone else and has no idea what their own body is doing or why. Grandmother's pharmacy had no copay, it had no waiting room, and it had been tested across more generations than any clinical trial has ever run. They didn't go to the doctor for every little thing. Now this chapter requires some nuance, so stay with me. Because there are two very different reasons why Black grandmothers did not run to the doctor for every sniffle and minor complaint. One of those reasons was structural, the discrimination, the cost, the inaccessibility of medical care for Black families in the 1950s and before. That was real, and it was wrong, and it caused genuine harm that we should never minimize. But the other reason is something worth examining carefully, because Black grandmothers who managed their health through daily habits, real food, consistent movement, natural remedies, strong community, and deep faith had simply built bodies and immune systems that did not need constant medical intervention for ordinary life. When you eat well for decades, your body becomes resilient. When you move consistently, your cardiovascular system builds strength. When you sleep deeply and regularly, your immune function stays sharp. When you live with community and purpose, your mental health does not deteriorate into crisis. When you use the natural remedies that work for minor ailments stay minor. The immune system, like every other system in the body, gets stronger through appropriate use. Your grandmother's body was not fragile. It had been built through a lifetime of practices that made it capable and durable and surprisingly resistant to the ordinary assaults of daily life. She was not lucky. She was prepared. They never outsourced their health to anyone else. They took ownership of their health. There is a mindset that has crept into modern health culture that is worth naming directly. The mindset that your health is someone else's responsibility, that the doctor is the one who knows what is happening in your body, that the pharmaceutical company has figured out what you need, that the app will tell you when to drink water and when to sleep and when to breathe deeply, that the wellness influencer has the answer you have been missing. Your grandmother would have found all of that deeply strange. She knew her own body the way she knew her own kitchen. She knew which ache was serious and which one just needed rest and time. She knew when something had changed and needed attention and when her body was simply working through something on its own schedule. She knew what she had eaten that was causing the stomach complaint, and she knew which remedy in her cabinet was going to handle it. She did not need anyone to tell her these things because she had been paid attention her entire life. That intimate self-knowledge, that refusal to be a stranger in her own body, is one of the most powerful and most overlooked aspects of the health those women carried. They were not passive recipients of wellness. They were the active, knowledgeable, experienced managers of their own physical and spiritual lives. And that ownership, that agency, that lifelong attention expressed itself in vitality that lasted decades longer than it had any statistical right to last. She was not a mystery. She was a method. And the method is available to every single one of us right now. We talk about the health crisis facing Black communities today, and we should talk about it because it is real and it is serious. The rates of diabetes and hypertension and cardiovascular disease and chronic illness in Black America represent a genuine emergency that deserves urgent, honest attention. But sometimes in the urgency of addressing where we are, we forget to look at where we came from. We forget that there were women in our families, not so many generations back, who were navigating genuinely hard lives with remarkably healthy bodies and remarkably resilient spirits. And the gap between them and us is not genetic. It is not inevitable. It is behavioral. It is cultural. It is a collection of daily choices and habits and practices that we have traded away for convenience and speed, and a lifestyle that is slowly making us sicker. Grandmother did not have a wellness routine. She had a life, and that life, structured around real food and constant movement and deep community and unshakable faith and intimate knowledge of her own body and the natural world around her, produced a quality of health that most of us are spending significant money and energy trying to reconstruct from scratch. We do not have to start from scratch. We just have to remember the wisdom is still there. It is in the recipes that got passed down. It is in the remedies that grandmothers whispered to daughters. It is in the habits and the values and the practices that the fast modern world told us were old-fashioned and unnecessary. They were not old-fashioned. They were right. If this video brought back memories of someone you loved, or if it made you think differently about your own health and where your family's wisdom lives, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me about your grandmother. Tell me what she knew. Tell me what she grew, or cooked, or prayed over, or pressed her hands on to make it better. Those stories deserve to be told, and this is exactly the place to tell them. Hit the like button if this meant something to you. Subscribe to Soulful Nostalgia so you never miss a conversation like this. Share this with somebody who needs to be reminded that the answers they are looking for might already be in their family's history. This is James. Take care of yourselves out there, and take care of each other.